Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be revisiting the topic of consistency. It's been a while since we talked about it explicitly for its own podcast. We mention it all the time, but we thought it might be good to revisit this conversation.
So to be consistent, we're talking about it again.
Before we get into that, like this video, subscribe, share, leave a comment. All those things really do help us out. If you want bonus content, a link to our Patreon is down below. Members over on Patreon get bonus videos every week as well as access to our Discord server. So definitely check out the membership options over there.
Absolutely.
So consistency. Something dawned on me this week about consistency.
About consistency? Okay, I'm interested to hear this. I haven't heard this.
Yeah, so I was thinking this week about like what we were going to talk about on the podcast, and really, when I was thinking about consistency, I think so many times we think about consistency from the head of household and how important that part is, and it really is. So I'm not downplaying that at all, but it is equally as important as a taken in hand to be consistent in your role. And to be consistent in following the rules, following the structures, and showing up in ways that are meaningful for your relationship in your role. And so that was one thing that was kind of a different take on consistency that came to me this week.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I think sometimes when we're on the topic of consistency, it only is directed at the head of household. It's not the taken hand, but really the whole reason that we talk so much about the dynamics in a domestic discipline relationship is because both people are involved in that and both people share some type of stake in it, although different. But the consistency really has to be on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have a domestic discipline relationship, it isn't one person driving all of the decisions and one person not really having any input. It really is a collaboration between two consenting adults to come together and form a structure to better their relationship as a whole. And that requires consistency on both parts. And so we do focus a lot on the head of household's consistency, because that's where accountability comes in. That's where, the rules and structures get upheld and reinforced with things like punishments and things like that. But as a taken in hand, you really do need to be consistent in your effort, because without that, things do have a tendency to fall apart. And it puts a lot of pressure on the head of household to uphold consistency, to uphold those boundaries, to put punishments in place, right? If you are being inconsistent as a taken in hand. Now, as a head of household, like those are things that you need to do. Like you do need to hold those boundaries. You do need to enforce those punishments to drive your taken in hand to being better about showing up in their role, right? So you do have to lead that process. That's part of your role, is that leadership aspect. But it is a shared responsibility, this idea of consistency within the relationship.
Yeah, and it was, as you were talking and talking about some of those things, man, it really is important for that consistency from, yes, the head of household, but the taken in hand, because especially I was thinking about in terms of the lack of consistency, the head of household is constantly having to punish. He's constantly having to do some of the things that he may be thinking, gosh, didn't we just do this yesterday? Or didn't we just do this a couple days before? And the inconsistency makes it to where, not that it's bad, but that he has to follow through a lot more. And at some point, it makes the head of household, at least I think, if that consistency is not happening, hey, is there something that I'm doing wrong? Because obviously she's not being consistent enough. Where did we get off on this train somewhere? Because the lack of consistency, I will tell you, really makes the head of household even question himself and go, wow, we need a timeout here. We need to try to fix that.
Well, and just like the lack of consistency from the head of household side, if a taken in hand isn't getting that reinforcement, isn't seeing those boundaries established, isn't having those punishments put into place when they are deserved, when they are earned, she can start to feel like things are falling apart and that the relationship's not working. So it really does go to show you that if either person is feeling the brunt of the burden of propelling the relationship forward and carrying the dynamic by themselves, that can cause disruption, that can cause a breakdown of the relationship. And so you really do need to both be putting in that effort, both be showing up consistently and making your attempts to follow through with what you have decided to do, what you have agreed to do. And yes, there's going to be mistakes. Yes, there's going to be those times when punishment comes into place, obviously. But for those things to be constantly happening because of a lack of consistency, it really does. And this goes for both sides. If a head of household is being inconsistent, if the taken in hand is being inconsistent, whoever it is, it really does communicate a lack of investment into the relationship.
That's a good word, investment.
And I know that when Coda has gone through periods of inconsistency, it makes me feel like he doesn't care about our dynamic, he doesn't care about our relationship, and he doesn't care about me. And I know that if I were being inconsistent, have I ever really gone through a period of being really inconsistent? I know I have.
You have, but what I was going to say in terms of that is exactly what you were just talking about with the head of households. Head of households, usually what I have found, at least in Ari and I's relationship, is when she becomes inconsistent, it's because I've already been on that road of inconsistency for at least a week or two. And again, I've communicated, even though I didn't mean to communicate this, I've communicated I don't care about the dynamic. I don't care about holding you to the rules. And whether or not that is true, my actions are what is showing that. Even if I don't believe that, my actions are communicating that. And so it makes it harder for her to be consistent. And then, you have the snowball effect. Maybe resentment's built up. Maybe problems start to build up. And you do have the snowball effect, don't you, when you have that problem?
Yes, and I do think that it's important to note, like, the head of household is the leader in the relationship. He sets the tone of the relationship. He needs to be strong enough and to be enough of a driving force in the relationship that it doesn't matter what the taken in hand is doing, that he's going to set the tone regardless. But a taken in hand naturally is the follower. She is the one that is coming under that leadership. And so when the head of household starts that trend of inconsistency, it can make things fall apart for her a lot faster than the other way around. But I know when I am inconsistent in our relationship, it does communicate a lack of trust, a lack of respect, a lack of, just participation. I know that Coda, whether he consciously feels it or not, subconsciously, I know that he feels disrespected when I don't show up and do what I'm supposed to do.
And that's why, head of households, it's so important for you to be consistent.
If the taken in hand is being inconsistent, then it's that much more important for the head of household to set the tone and set the expectation and hold those boundaries. If he lets her inconsistency discourage him into becoming inconsistent himself, it's only going to drive that cycle further. But if he's the one that starts that cycle of inconsistency, then he can't be surprised when she follows that leadership into a disruptive path, right? And so now, taken in hands, that is not a free pass just to use your head of household.
Do whatever you want.
Well, and to use your head of household's inconsistency as a free pass, right? You want to, even if your head of household is being inconsistent, you want to do what you're supposed to do. You want to be consistent in your role and maybe have a conversation. Just be like, look, I've really been trying, but it's been difficult because I've seen a lack of consistency with you checking in on me or you holding some of these structures. I need to know that you still care about these things. Are these things that still need to be rules? Are these structures that you still want me to follow? And if so, then can we figure out a way to have more consistency in the follow through with those?
In order to say that you're the head of your household, you're the leader of your household, you need to be consistent in everything that you do. And we know, we've talked about this before, there are days it can be so hard. You've had a long day. The day just didn't go the way you wanted. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep the night before. We've had those times. And you really don't want to maybe follow through with a punishment that the taken in hand has earned, or something has gone on. Whatever it might be, the important thing is no matter how you feel in that moment, try to bury that for just the time being and be consistent, follow through with the maintenance, follow through with the punishment, follow through with the conversation. Whatever it is that you have set up with the taken in hand in order for this relationship to work and have the consistency happen, that's what you've got to do. And yeah, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be the first one to raise my hand and say, it's really difficult to do that sometimes. It really is hard, but you would be surprised how by just doing that, how that's going to benefit your relationship long term, and it's going to help you grow as a leader, because you can realize, hey, even in those moments where I just felt like I couldn't go any further, I did. And what did it show? It showed that I can do it, and it also communicated to my taken in hand, no matter what he is feeling, he is going to be consistent and hold me to the things that that we've talked about in our relationship, therefore communicating he cares.
Now, I think that is all really good advice. However, it is okay if you are just so emotionally or physically spent from your day. Maybe you had a really long day at work. Maybe you've had just a lot happen. Maybe the kids took twice as long to get to bed that night, and now it is really late.
That happens a lot.
And it is okay as a head of household to give that lecture and postpone the physical aspect of punishment if you are you don't want to not do it justice, right? You don't want to put in half the effort. You don't want to even go in with a bad attitude, like, oh, I'm tired, let's just get this over with. You don't want to communicate that to your taken in hand, because I guarantee you, every time I break a rule, even if it's something that is a simple rule, I do feel a sense of shame and a sense of guilt over the fact that I'm putting not only myself in the position to receive punishment, but I'm putting my head of household in the position of having to give that punishment. And so if he comes at that punishment with this sense of like, oh, let's just get this over with, it's really going to make me feel that much worse. And it has the potential to make the punishment not effective.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. What I don't want to misconstrue is exactly what you said, that you have to just follow through and have that, well, let's just get this over with. The point there is that when we're talking about consistency, is even if you postpone a punishment till the next day, the communication is what's key in that consistency. It's not necessarily saying, okay, we've got to go the full mile tonight. No, but make sure you're communicating with your taken in hand that, hey, I'm not going to do this tonight because I don't want to rush through this. You will be punished tomorrow, but here's the communication that I'm giving that I haven't forgotten. We are going to follow through with this. But we're just going to have to wait till tomorrow because this happened, and this happened. But that's the consistency that we're talking about.
Yeah, you want to acknowledge what happened. You don't want your taken in hand to feel like, oh, he just forgot. We've definitely gone through that where where I've had to come to Coda and be like, hey, were you going to talk to me about this? Because it's been on my mind, and I know what I did, and I'm pretty sure you know what I did, but nothing's been said about it, and that's kind of bothering me.
And what can be the lesson there is I don't know if any of you head of households struggle with this, but one of the things I'm having to get myself out of the bad habit is I have conversations with the aria in my head thinking that I had the conversations with the actual person. And so I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm having to train myself out of to say, oh, wait a minute, I had the conversation with her in my head, and the reason I do is I try to formulate what I'm going to say before I have the actual conversation, but sometimes my mind just goes, box checked when I actually didn't talk to the physical person. So that's also part of consistency too, is if you are somebody like me where you have to think through it before you have the conversation, don't forget to have that conversation so you're not leaving your taken in hand in the dark. And I'm getting a little better at that,
You
right?
are. Absolutely. Now, some tools that we use to kind of build consistency into our dynamic is that we do have a shared task app. We use Obedience. That's the name of the app. Now, there
Good app.
are a lot of task list apps out there. We like this one just because of some of the features that it has set up. But whatever draws you to it, we just like Obedience because we can both have the same access to the same list, and it has some features built in to where it can go ahead and automatically track punishments if they're earned. It can, there's a lot of customization into it. So that's what we use. And that is a tool for me to show up consistently, because not only is it tracking my responsibilities, my tasks, but then I'm responsible then to go in and check those things off as I'm doing them. That's one way that I can be consistent in showing up and making sure that I'm offering that communication through the app, right? So if I don't check something off, that's a communication because it automatically ticks off that punishment. Or if I check it off, then that's a communication to say I'm consistently doing the things I'm supposed to do throughout the day. We also have a journal app that I like to use that Coda has.
Is that called Pinzu?
Pinzu, yeah.
Pinzu, yep.
Again, there are so many journaling apps.
There's a lot out there. Just go into an app store for a journaling app. It's almost
the reason I like to use an app instead of a physical journal, because if you've listened to the podcast, you know that I love my physical calendar.
You like to write.
I love my physical lists. I like pen and paper. But the reason I like using an app for this particular purpose is that Coda can have my login information, and there are some journals that he technically has access to all of them, but there's some journals that I'm like, I like to keep that one just for me, and he respects that.
Absolutely.
And then there's some journals that he knows are there specifically for us to have that communication. So I can journal throughout the day and just let him know, hey, I wrote some stuff for you to be able to read. And so that's another way we just build in communication, and having that constant communication, having those systems in place does allow both of us to show up more consistently in our roles. One way that Coda shows up consistently is by holding accountability, even for those smaller things.
Yeah.
We had an instance this week actually where, I broke one of our smaller, more habit-based rules. It wasn't an issue of disrespect. It wasn't an issue of anything.
Maliciousness.
Right. I didn't maliciously not do the thing, but regardless, I didn't do the thing. And so Coda, I don't think that it crossed his mind to not hold accountability, but that's something in the past that he really would have wrestled with.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But we've had conversations where I'm like, look, if you want me to use these systems and you value this structure for me, you have to hold me accountable. And I just simply forgot. And it was one of those things that it just slipped my mind. I didn't even think of it until it was way too late to rectify my mistake. So I had to accept accountability for that, and Coda offered that accountability. So even with consistency, things are going to happen, and you have to kind of course correct just a little bit. I'm the type of taken in hand that I really do need those course corrections on those smaller things, because I don't want to feel like the structures are falling apart.
That makes sense.
And when I don't get those little course corrections, when I don't get, those smaller punishments for forgetfulness, it has a tendency to make me think like, oh, our structure's falling apart. Some taken in hands, a stern talking to or a reminder might work. But for me, I really do need that tangible correction in order to know that the structure is still in place, that the expectations are still in place. And so that's what we found works for us. You have to have those conversations, though, to know what works for your taken in hand. I know there's a lot of couples out there that are like, one small instance of forgetfulness, that's a conversation. That's not a punishment. And if that works for you, then
Great. I mean,
yeah.
it's going to work differently for everybody. It depends on your taking in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of you may have been listening and go, wow, she wound up getting a spanking for a little bit of that infraction. Well, that's something that Aria and I have talked about that she needs, again, in order to have that consistency and to stay on the path that she's trying to stay on. But the point is here, head of households, regardless of whether those infractions in your relationship end up with a spanking or not, don't do what I used to do in the past, which is basically do nothing and just kind of avoid it or let it go by the wayside because it wasn't that bad of a violation. Make sure the consistency part of it, that even if it is just in your relationship, even if it's just a stern conversation, that you still follow through with that, because that's the point really of all of this. Don't just sweep it under the rug, even if it's a small violation of the rules.
Right. I mean, because in the past, Coda would have maybe noticed. He definitely
I would have noticed, yeah.
He would have noticed, but he wouldn't have mentioned it to me. He would have just kind of been like, oh, I'm going to give her some grace in that area. She was really tired. Yesterday was kind of yesterday was a weird day. She probably just forgot, like no big deal. And he never would have that conversation with me. And so I was like the whole day, I'm putting myself into this scenario in the past, and it's like I would spend the whole day being like, I didn't do this, and he's really gonna, like, he must be so disappointed in me. And I'm thinking
you're going through this whole scenario in your head.
Oh yeah, and the whole day while he's at work, I'm just like thinking like he is just gonna come home and let me have it, and
then nothing would happen. Yeah, I just sweep it under the rug
because the lack of communication really communicated more anger to me than probably was ever felt because it was such a small thing. And so this time he, right away, first thing in the morning, I was like, hey, I forgot to do this. And he's like, yeah, I noticed. And so it was just a simple, like, I'll let you know what your punishment's going to be later. And that was it.
And then you knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I knew that you acknowledged it. I knew that I was going to face a consequence for it. Didn't know exactly what that was going to be until you informed me later that I would be getting a spanking. And it was like, no, I didn't have to go through the mental fret
of
and like
gymnastics and everything.
Of like, man, he must be really angry at me because he didn't say anything about this. He must be so disappointed.
He's stewing.
And then I'm beating myself up all day over something so small.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, like, yes, it is a structure that we have set in place for a reason. But it's not something that's going to completely derail our relationship because I forgot once. But I would really be going through it when he wouldn't say anything. So this time I was able to say, okay, mistake acknowledged, consequence coming. I can move throughout my day and still be productive and still show up in every other area because I know, like, this will be dealt with later.
Absolutely.
And I had a really good day that day.
You did. And we were able to deal with it. And you afterwards, it was really great because we were able to just continue on with our week. It didn't derail us. She felt that she had paid her price and for that infraction and that she could move on. Wouldn't that be accurate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we are having this conversation with you to say, hey, we did the thing and we succeeded. But also to say, like, this took so much trial and error.
Yes, very much so. This is not going to happen overnight.
And we're just like, hey, if you are having issues with inconsistency or you're having issues with your systems breaking down, it could be because of what is being perceived as being inconsistent, even if you don't think it is. Because I don't think Coda ever thought that he was being inconsistent.
Not at all.
But to me, it felt inconsistent because there was no acknowledgement of when those smaller infractions would happen. And he would wait until, like, disrespect happened. Like the big stuff. And what he didn't realize is that by not acknowledging all those smaller systems, by not course correcting and guiding me through those smaller infractions, that it was leading to the disrespect.
That's exactly right. It was leading to the bigger stuff. If you don't take care of the little things, they become big things. Most of the big things in life, they don't start out as big things. They start out as small things. So if you take care of them when they're small, they never get to be big things. And so after we had numerous conversations and really talked through it, and I got more consistent in what we had talked about and following through with that, it was like, oh, wow. By taking care of that small thing, it never became the big thing. And yeah, that happened kind of in the middle of our week, or was that the beginning of the week? I can't remember. But I just remember it didn't derail us wherever it was. Where before, if it got into the little thing became a big thing, it sometimes would. It would derail our weekend, or it would derail the rest of the week, and it just became a big hassle at that point. This time, no, it wasn't that at all. So we want to encourage you guys, if you're going through that, we have been through that, and so just have those conversations again and get back on the horse, try it again, but you will get there. We promise you will get there.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that it made you think about consistency in a different way. I definitely took a different approach to how I thought about consistency this week, through thinking about it through the lens of how both people have a shared responsibility in the consistency aspect of the relationship. It is not all on the head of household. It's not all on the taken in hand. Yes, the head of household should be leading that process, just like he should be leading the relationship in every aspect. But taken in hands, you have a responsibility here too, just like you have a responsibility in your relationship. So hope that brought some new ideas, new thoughts, new conversations up for you as well. All right, guys, we will talk to you next week.
See you later.